Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Haskincast podcast. We are now just shy of a week past Thanksgiving here in the States, and I'm very confused with how this is all working nowadays because Black Friday used to be the day after Thanksgiving, and that was when you got some of the best deals of the year. Now Black Friday actually started November 1st, at least in the music industry, and for some companies, I don't really pay that much attention to too many things outside of the industry because I'm getting over 100 emails a day just on those deals. I don't really have time to look at too many other things. But here's what I find interesting. So Black Friday actually started 3 weeks ago, and you had those sales starting, announcing themselves as early Black Friday sales. Then Black Friday happens, but that actually starts happening like 12 hours before it's actually Friday. And then Black Friday sales get extended through the weekend into Monday, which became known as Cyber Monday, which was the sort of internet counterpart to Black Friday sales. Then Cyber Monday now became extended Cyber Monday, which goes into Tuesday and Wednesday, which now, as I've seen today for the first time, has turned into Cyber Week. So really, it just starts on the first of the month and it keeps rolling and they keep changing the name, but it's really the same sales. Even some of the deals that I found in the music industry were exactly the same for Cyber Monday as they were for Black Friday, as they were on November 1st. So I don't even know what the shopping strategies are these days. I just say if you see a good deal and, grab it because it could change, but it's probably not going to. You're probably just going to see that same price in extended Cyber Monday to Cyber Week or extended Black Friday or whatever they're going to call it. It's just a complete mess now. But anyway, I hope you guys all got some great deals or are continuing to get great deals as we're now in the middle of Cyber Week or extended Black Monday, Cyber Friday, whatever. It's just absolutely crazy. So that's my 2 cents on Thanksgiving. I hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday. I spent the day in the studio working on a project that I'm hoping will be finished and released here pretty soon for a private deal. And then I just went and got some fresh air and took a long walk down the strip really late that night. Air is pretty crisp, so it was a chilly walk, but really nice to get out of the chair after sitting in it for like 18 hours straight. So today's guest is a really good friend of mine, Jeff Mariotte. He's a fantastic author. He's done over 70 books. I've worked on a couple books with him on audiobook projects with our reader, Tamara McDaniel, who's just a fantastic voice actress. She was actually the one that introduced me to him. And then he and I met, I think for the first time in person, at Phoenix Comic-Con the first year that I went. And then we connected the second year I went when I was one of the speakers, in a panel that turned out to just be a panel of me talking for an hour about sound and audio in, the film business. That was actually a lot of fun. So did a couple audiobooks with Jeff. Cold Black Hearts was the first one, which is just a fantastic, intense journey. And then The Devil's Bait, which is another fantastic, intense journey. But this one goes from a small, desolate town to around the world. So it's really good to see the span of his work as a writer. It's definitely, one book is very different from another, but they're all highly, highly enjoyable. And he's one of those people that makes me want to find time to sit down and read when I don't make the time to do it. And I'm saying that perfectly taking responsibility for it. I choose to make other things a priority. And now those priorities are always creating new projects, marketing, networking, finding new work to do between my own projects, because some pay and some don't. So you have to find more of the ones that pay so you can do more of the ones that don't pay. It's a really weird, vicious cycle here. But he is really one of those, like his writing is that good. And it makes me want to carve out time to get one of his books and curl up on the couch. But I've had the pleasure of reading a couple, and every one of them has just been top notch. So he's one of those people that I would highly, highly recommend that you check out. And I'll have some links in the show notes. The books that we worked on, Cold Black Hearts and The Devil's Bait, are available on Amazon, Audible, acx.com. I think they're on iTunes now. So those can be listened to on any of those places. You can download them to, variety of different devices or just listen on your computer. If you're an audiobook lover, grab them, enjoy them because they're fantastic books. So without me babbling on any longer, let's go ahead and get Jeff on the show. All right, let's go ahead and welcome Jeff to the show. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's a really beautiful day here in Las Vegas. Not a dot of blue in the sky, which is really rare for us, so it's exciting to me.
Yes.
You guys get pretty much the same weather we do. You're usually a couple of degrees hotter and a little less wind, but it's very similar.
Yep. Yeah, we had the cloudy skies a couple of days ago. It's all clear blue today. So that's probably coming your way in a couple of days.
Well, I definitely will not be looking forward to that. I'm just going to enjoy the clouds while I have them.
There you go.
So that's right. So you're down in Phoenix now, and the last time you and I saw each other was when you were up here doing a promotional signing at Barnes & Noble. I think that was when Empty Rooms had come out, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
I loved that book. And, what I loved about it was that it was a little bit different of a story from the kind of stuff that I've read from you, being more of a detective novel. But also it just happened to take place in Detroit, where I'm from. But as I recall, that one, it was meant to be a series. Are you working on more on that one?
I wish that I was, but the sales on that one did not seem to merit continuing the series.
Oh.
I really like the characters. I like the setting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not from Detroit, but I'm from the Chicago area, and so I'm a Midwestern native, and I did spend a lot of time in Detroit doing research, and I like the city and Michigan in general, but I could not make it interesting for a publisher, so...
Yeah, that's a real shame. And the thing is that sales and publishing interest does not necessarily constitute the level of enjoyment of any project, whether you're a musician or an author or a painter. It's all subjective. But really, that does not mean it wasn't a great book. I loved it. It was one of those books that I didn't want to put down. I would look ahead and see how many pages is the next chapter and then justify, okay, I'll stay up another 15 minutes because I can get through X amount of pages. And then I'd get to the end of that and then justify going another chapter because I just didn't want to stop reading.
That's my goal when I write, to keep the reader interested, keep the reader moving along through it, and I physically try to structure the book such that you can look ahead and go, oh yeah, this chapter is very long, I can finish this one. Oh well, the next one's pretty short, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that means that what I was trying to do worked.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I found that with all of your books, and of course, the first two that I had read of yours, we were working on the audiobook version. Yes. Tamara McDaniel did both. Coal Black Hearts was the first one, and then The Devil's Bait was the second one.
She's awesome.
She is, and I remember when she first told me about you, and that we were going to do a book of yours, and she said, it's this kind of horror novel, you'll love it, because I'm a big horror fan. When we were doing Coal Black Hearts, I fell in love with the character immediately. I had these really vivid visuals in my head of the area that she was going to because you described it so well. I mean, you gave me enough to let my own mind create it, but you gave me the place setting to create a proper environment for it. Is that something that you really focus on doing, or is it something that just kind of comes out naturally?
No, it's definitely intentional. When I'm writing, I like to put real places into the work. Even if it's a fictitious town, I like to know where it's set in the country or in the world. And I like to go to the places that I'm writing about. You have Google Maps and lots of online references and magazines and whatever, but using those for research doesn't tell you, if you're standing on this spot here, what can you hear? What can you smell? What can you see from here?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to physically get to the places that I'm writing about, and take a lot of notes, take a lot of pictures, and refer to those when I'm writing so that I know.
Yeah, I like that.
I guess so that I'm grounded myself, and then I know that I'm describing the setting, and I think setting is really important to me for the enjoyment of a story, and I try to convey that to the reader.
I agree. I think it, and especially in that book in particular, really the locations were a big part of that story because she had to be isolated to an extent. She had to have access to certain things, but not the quick, easy ability that we have to, react with a cell phone and things these days. I think too, connecting with the physical energy of a location. Like when I'm doing film scoring, if I can go to the set and visit it, I love to do that because I want that, like you said, the smell of it. I want the feel of it. I want to know what character that plays as well. So I think that's one of my favorite things about your work is the way that you describe the environment so that you can really feel like you're a part of it.
Well, I spent a lot of time out in that kind of New Mexico wilderness area down on the Boot Hill. Mm-hmm. There's not much there, which is what I was looking for, and I found it.
Yeah, it definitely came out as desolate and isolated for sure.
Yeah.
The second one that we worked on was The Devil's Bait. And this was a whole completely different story. This one was kind of a world traveling story. Have you been overseas to some of these places as well?
Yes. My father worked for the Department of Defense as a civilian, so he had spent time in France during World War II, and when I was 6 years old, he had the opportunity to move back there, so we lived in France for 5 years, then we moved to Virginia, then we moved to Germany, then I came to California for college and have stayed in the West ever since, but during my younger days, I spent a lot of time in Europe, and we went to all the countries of Western Europe, and I've been back several times. I love Paris, and that's why I shot those scenes in Paris. Mm-hmm. So I think the only place I haven't spent a lot of time that was in that book was Iowa. I believe there was a section that was Iowa.
I think so, yeah.
Where the sister lived. I think so. I think she was in Iowa. I've been through Iowa, but I haven't spent a lot of time there.
Well, plus it wasn't a key scene. It wasn't something that you really, you weren't following the main character so much at that point that you kind of really needed to get into that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a good, and I really liked working on both of those books. They were great stories to follow. It really does get a bit tiring working as a director and then the editor of the audiobook because it's hours and hours and hours of pouring through the story.
Oh, sure.
And but your stories were a lot of fun because they moved. They weren't stagnant. I went to open a door handle and I had a memory that's going to take 20 pages to describe. I mean, your books really, they don't lack for description or detail, but they also don't stay in one place a lot. The story seems to always move forward, and I really like that style.
Well, you and Tammy did such a great job on those, and I'm just thrilled with the way they came out.
Thank you.
More people should listen to them. They should rush out to Audible right now.
Yeah, and of course you can get the audiobooks on Amazon and ACX as well, and iTunes now carries them. Which is great because it's the audio format has become such a huge thing because people don't carve out as much time to just sit and read a book as they used to. It's not something I have the time to do anymore, or more fairly, don't make the time to do anymore. But do you feel like I do, where it's still great to just sit there with a physical book in your hand, and the Kindle just doesn't really feel the same? Yeah,
I'm an old-fashioned print guy. I very rarely listen to audiobooks. I never read books online if I can help it or on a device. Mm-hmm. Which you could tell by looking at my house because there's books everywhere. But besides that, I like the tactile sensation of holding it and turning the pages, and the page kind of is its own element. So So there's an emotional impact to a page, and then the turn of a page, and then what comes on the next page.
And the sense of accomplishment when you finish, if it's a particularly large book, when you get through those last pages and all the weight is in your left hand, you're like, wow, I actually sat and read this entire thing. Yeah, I definitely don't get that sense if I read something on like a Kindle or the computer. It's just, and the physical page turn and the smell of that, there's just so much to it that you really can't recapture digitally. But the environmental side of it, of me goes, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. And the practical side, and that you can carry a few hundred books on your Kindle instead of having, that's a full bookcase.
Right,
and
right.
Not everybody has room for a full bookcase or wants to spend the money on owning all those books.
True. And there's that thing about the fact that we live in this instant gratification world that instead of going out and looking at shelves in a bookstore and picking out what you want, you just go online, you download it, you have it, you can start reading it.
Although to me that's balanced against the wonder of discovery in a bookstore when you just peruse the shelves and you see a title that looks interesting and you go, oh, what's that about? You pull it out and you look at it. Yeah. And that's not as easy to do in an online situation. It can happen.
That's absolutely true. I found brand new authors, well, not brand new authors, but authors that were new to me simply by walking down and looking at the shelves in the section of a bookstore and going, well, this cover looks interesting. What's this about? Or that title sounds intriguing. I wonder what that story is,
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of curious because your books are so detailed and so intense. Do you tend to work off of an outline or do you just you have your idea and you go with it?
I usually use an outline. I don't always. Trying to think in the case of the Devil's Bait, I don't think I had much of an outline. But in the case of Cold Black Hearts, I did. So it varies project by project. But I do a lot of what's called tie-in books or licensed fiction, where I'm writing in an existing fictional universe, whether it's CSI or NCIS or Star Trek or Narcos or whatever. And with those projects, an outline is a requirement. Here's the process. They sell the rights to a publishing company. The publishing company hires a writer, and then the writer provides an outline, and the license holder approves the outline or makes changes to the outline, or says absolutely not, that come up with something else. But in any case, you have to have an outline, and then once you have the outline, because it's been approved, you have to hew fairly close to what you've written. And then they approve the final manuscript as well. So I'm used to working with an outline, and I'm used to kind of plotting out in advance. So the vast majority of my books have been outlined.
Do you find when you're writing under that kind of contract that it is a little bit limiting, because if you come up with an idea that you like better, you really can't deviate and delve into that idea too much? You're kind of stuck with the block you've created?
There is that. Especially when I'm working on my own stuff, if I outline it, of course I can always make whatever changes to it I want. I kind of view it as a roadmap where I'm on a trip. I know that I'm starting in Phoenix and I'm ending up in New Hampshire. And along the way, there are these points that I want to stop at. But if I'm driving through Kansas and there's a sign that says the world's biggest ball of string is 10 miles that way, I'm going to go see the world's biggest ball of string.
Sure.
So I divert from my course, knowing that after I see the ball of string, I can get back on my path and go end up where I want to be. I won't get lost.
Right.
So that, to me, is the advantage of an outline. I'm not going to get lost even if I divert. With a licensed book, obviously, as you say, there are restrictions in that you can't just throw out the outline that you've had approved unless you have a relationship with the editor and the licensor that allows you to say, hey, you know what, I had this idea, can I do this? Maybe they'll say yes, maybe they'll say no. But in general, the object is to stick pretty closely to the outline.
Right. Have you ever had the case that I have with my first novel is in editing right now, and I had originally written it as a short script and then a feature script, and then I modified it and turned it into a novel. But when I was doing that, and I thought this is going to be a fairly simple conversion because I've already got the entire story, I just need to fill in some colors and things. And it just took a whole new direction. And I think I had an outline that I threw out probably 5 or 6 different times in the course of that, because I would come across something that would completely change the way I was going to reach the destination, even though the destination always stayed the same. Have you ever just said, all right, I'm going to stop writing outlines and just go for it, finishing this story?
Yeah. And even in that case, if I'm doing that, I often will make a few notes of as I'm working through things, and I think, this is a cool idea, I want to make sure I do this. Mm-hmm. Then I'll put that down in a document, and I'll keep referring back to that document, because it's, I guess, standing in for an outline. It's not a full outline anymore, but it's just reminding me of the landmarks that I want to hit on the way.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's exactly what I did. I didn't know what else to do. And there were other key things that I thought I want to make sure that I remember. I left this thread that I need to sew this up before the book's end, and this wasn't something I had originally intended. You mentioned an editor. So how do you typically do your book? Do you edit it yourself? Do you work with someone else? Do you and your wife edit for each other?
All of the above. I do a lot of revision on my own stuff before anybody sees it, and then Marcy sees it, and she'll usually make at least one editorial pass on it. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to my agent, or if it's a licensed project, he doesn't usually read it before it goes to the editor, but if it's an original project, we go to my agent. Except I don't have an agent anymore, but when I had an agent, that's what would happen. We broke up. But that's a different story.
It happens. Are you looking for someone new, or are you going to go it on your own?
Yeah, I'm not very actively looking, but I've got a book out now with an agent who I've known for a long time but have never worked with, and he's looking it over, and we may or may not come to an understanding. If we don't, then I'll go elsewhere. Sure.
Yeah, because, obviously you're going to keep pushing the book, whether it works out with one person or not.
Right. But the point is, typically when I'm writing a tie-in book, I was hired by an editor, so that editor is going to have his own or her own feedback and notes and whatever. And if I'm writing a book on spec, then whatever publisher is going to pick it up will have their own editor. So there's always going to be another editor other than me and Marcy who's going to be have his or her hands on it. And I want that.
Yeah.
I want that because that person will see things that I didn't see and think of things that I didn't think of.
Exactly. Well, plus I think, you guys get used to each other's writing styles so much that there's probably things that just slip by because you're so comfortable with each other, and to get some completely fresh, clean opinion that has no basis point is very healthy.
Yep. And another pair of eyes is always a good thing.
Are you getting pretty good at taking criticism these days when it comes to something that you maybe want to really hold your ground on and the editor's like, no, this just doesn't work?
Yeah, I'm used to it. I'm willing to fight for what I feel is important, and if I feel really strongly about it, especially if it's an original project of mine, then I usually get my way.
Good.
If it's a tie-in project, then I have less control over it.
Sure.
Even then, sometimes there's battles.
Yeah.
You have to know which ones to stand your ground on and which ones to give up on.
Is it that you fight for what you think works in the story, or is there times when it comes almost like an ego clash because you're kind of attacking my personal space?
Yeah, no, I I don't have an issue with that. If there's something that I think works for the story, or for the character. As an example, and I won't mention any names, but Marcy and I wrote a tie-in book together, and our editor was fine, but the licensor had never had a novel or worked on a novel or possibly read a novel, and had some strange ideas about the characters that didn't mesh with our ideas, and had some strange ideas about just word usage, and didn't seem to understand licensed fiction very well, and we had some rough times on that one, let's just say.
It can be difficult the first time that you go through an experience like that. It sounds really exciting. Yes, we should do this, but without having the experience or understanding of it, like the first time I work with a director on a film as the composer, if they've never worked with a composer before, it can be a difficult thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And you're not necessarily working with the actual content creator, like not the original person that came up with the series, just whoever's in charge of that responsibility.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay.
In this case, it was a game property, and we were working with some of the creators of the game, so they were the original developers. On like TV show books. Usually, it's a person in a licensing department somewhere who has no direct bearing on the show, but not always. I wrote a couple of novels based on the NBC series Las Vegas, and on the second one, I worked directly with the show creator, Gary Scott Thompson, because he had a particular idea in mind. He wanted the book to be set between two seasons. At the end of one season, the Montecito Hotel, based on the Mandalay Bay, but it was called the Montecito, and at the end of the season, they blew the hotel up.
Huh.
At the beginning of the next season, they had a brand new hotel built. You live in Las Vegas, you know that doesn't happen in 3 months.
No.
Or even 6 months, which on the show they said it was a period of 6 months had passed.
Yeah, that's incredibly unrealistic, yeah.
Yeah, but he wanted the novel to tell the stories of what the characters were doing in that 6-month interim. And so we hashed out their stories individually, one by one. This character's going to do this, this character's going to do that, this character's going to do that. And then I wrote it, and then on the next season of the show, occasionally they would refer to things that they had done during that interim period.
Oh.
So my novel kind of became canon, became part of the overall fabric of the TV series, which was cool.
That's very cool. Did he know where he wanted them to be at the start of the season, or was that something you guys created together?
At the start of the season, they all had to be back, ready to go back to work or going back to work. So I just had to get them to that point.
So when you would watch the following season, was it kind of neat to hear some reference to your creation?
Absolutely.
I bet.
Yeah. That almost never happened in tie-in writing, so it was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. What was the first tie-in that you did, and how did that come about?
My first novel was a tie-in. It was when I was working in the comic book business for WildStorm Productions, and I had written some comics with these characters called Gen 13, this teen superhero team. And a friend of mine, author Christopher Golden, had also written some Gen 13 comics. And we made an animated feature film of Gen 13. Directed by Kevin Altieri, who'd done a lot of Batman the Animated Series stuff and other TV animation. So I made this film, and we sold it to Disney, and sold for domestic distribution. We sold sold international distribution to Paramount. And Ace Books, which is a division of Penguin, decided they wanted to do novels based on this property because there was a movie coming out from Disney. Mm-hmm. Well, we did the deal with Ace, and Ace asked Chris Golden to write the first book. He'd done some X-Men novels and some other comic book tie-in stuff. But he was busy, and he and I were pals and had been kind of looking for a project to do together, so he asked me if I would write it with him. And I said yes. So because he was busy, I did about 75% of the writing, and he did about 25%. And we went back and forth. This was in caveman days, so we were mailing floppy disks to each other.
I remember those, yeah.
As we did a couple of chapters, we'd send the floppy disk from San Diego to Boston, where he was, and back to San Diego. So that was my first novel, and then Disney put the movie on the shelf and never released it. So,
really?
So there you go. So
wow.
They just took $1 million and flushed it down the toilet.
Yeah, no wonder it cost like $180 to get into the park.
Exactly.
But aside from that decision, I mean, that's a huge first at bat, right? I mean, you're selling your first project to Disney. You haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. How did you connect with Disney?
I don't even know. I wasn't the one who handled that part of it, mm-hmm. But I was, at that point, I was vice president of marketing for the company. And the company's president knew everybody everywhere and is a good businessman. He's currently the president of Marvel Comics.
Oh, wow.
And so he made it happen somehow. Mm-hmm. And the owner of the company was Jim Lee, who's a very famous comic artist who had left Marvel Comics to become one of the first founders of Image Comics. And so we were a pretty powerhouse company in that time, and we got an animated series on the air on CBS called Wildcats, and we got this Disney deal for our first animated feature.
That's fantastic.
And then DC Comics bought the company, and Jim became co-publisher at DC, which is where he still is.
Wow, you definitely had some of the right connections for sure, but without the quality of the work, it wouldn't have gotten to that point. So you really just kind of jumped into making the right things at the right time.
Yeah.
And then is that what led to some of your other series, like the CSI stuff? And then I think you did a Buffy one too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a lot of Buffy stuff, and yes, that led directly because Chris and our friend Nancy Holder had written the first Buffy novel when Buffy was pretty new on the air, and he introduced me to his Buffy editor, and she had me do a book that was adapting 3 Buffy episodes that were focused on the character Xander. Mm-hmm. And I did that. She was okay with it, and then the Angel spinoff came out, and I was kind of slow on the Buffy bandwagon. I hadn't been watching from the beginning, but now that I was involved, I was watching and catching up. Mm-hmm. And I started watching Angel from the beginning, and pitched her an Angel novel, and she bought it, and then I ended up writing 11 Angel novels.
Wow.
And a bunch of Angel comics, and co-wrote the second Buffy Watcher's Guide, which is a nonfiction kind of an overview of the series with interviews with everybody and that kind of thing, and episode guides and all that. The second one of those, and then we did the first one for Angel.
What season of Buffy were they in when you started working on the novel?
Probably the third.
Okay.
Second or third.
So it was reasonably established by that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a bit of a Buffy Vegas tie-in on the minimal side. Allison Hannigan, who was one of the actresses on that show, was hosting the Fool Us show with Penn and Teller. That they were doing up here. So she would, she would bring out the magician that was going to try and fool them. And most of the time they ended up involving her in whatever the illusion was. But she's very talented. Cool. She was so, kind of shy on the show a little bit. One of those sort of nerdy characters that really doesn't do well with people. But boy, as just a person in her job, she was a fantastic host, very exuberant. And
she's terrific.
Yeah, she is.
And actually, I didn't mention it, but the Gen 13 novel that Chris and I wrote together is also set in Las Vegas.
Oh, is that right?
We decided that Las Vegas was a portal to hell. and the Gen 13 kids had to go and deal with the consequences of that.
Wow, I like that. Yeah, I'm not going to say you're wrong.
Yeah. We made up a horror-themed hotel. Because both horror writers at heart, and so we made up this horror-themed hotel in Las Vegas. That's where most of the action takes place. And it surprises me that they haven't built one yet.
Well, that's it. I mean, I've said to several people, I don't understand why we don't have a horror-themed hotel. I think it would be a little expensive, but you could certainly do a lot with some very simple, you just put some speakers in the hallways with random crying and, it could be done so easily, and I really think it would be a huge hit.
I do too.
Yeah. I wish I knew some hotel developers that could throw up a hotel in 6 months.
Exactly. That's all you need.
Yeah.
A couple of bucks in 6 months and you got a hotel.
Right. Now, I know a lot of authors, and a lot of them I see posting their word goals. Like, I want to write 4,000 words today, or I want to get to, finish this chapter today. Do you set yourself any kind of expectation or pressure to reach, or do you just go until you don't feel like writing?
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I guess I did when I was younger, but I used to write faster than I do now. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 words a day was not uncommon. Although my goal was usually 5,000, not 5. But these days I don't set a goal. I just write. I just fill the time. And when the time's up, which is usually when it's time to go pick the kids up from school or time to start dinner or whatever.
Sure.
Then I'm done for the day. But.
So it's really almost like a day job, right? You have a schedule. You start at this time, you break for lunch, have tea, whatever you're going to do, and then of course you have the life stuff that gets in the way. So then you got to stop and do those things.
Yep.
Yeah. I find that I try to do that, and I fairly well stick to it, but then I come back after dinner and I'm just going to finish this one thing up, and then the next thing I know, the sun's coming up, and I think, I should probably get a couple hours sleep.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore.
But you've been there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I think that if you can sort of write on command that way, if you can get in the zone and just get back into the story. I find if I've had to go away from a story for a little while and I come back to it, it's really hard to pick up that momentum. Is that something so you experience that too?
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you do?
Butt in chair, hands on keys.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that works for me.
Do you kind of read back the last few pages to kind of get back on that road?
Yeah, read it back, go back and edit the last chapter or whatever. But yeah, it's a constant issue. Mm-hmm. And if I've been away from it for too long, and it's hard, but it has to be done, so I do it.
Yeah, it's the only way it's going to get done is if you push through it.
Yeah.
And you can always edit it later if you find that chain didn't really link up right. That's always something you can fix in editing. Do you edit as you go, or do you just kind of let it pour out because you're going to look at it later?
I like to go back and at least look over the last couple of pages before I start on today's work, but I don't always, and if I'm in a groove and it's just coming out fast, then I just leave it for later. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a rigorous answer either way.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I think some of the best advice I was given was actually by Tammy. She said, when I wrote the first draft of it was just going to be a 10-minute screenplay. I did it very bare bones, and she said, just write whatever you want it to be, and then as the producer, I'll figure out what we can and can't do in making this a movie. But throw everything you want in it, because if you don't, it's not going to be there. Versus, and then I can compromise this or that. Do you ever think in terms of any kind of limitations when you write, or do you just let your imagination go and you just put it on paper?
The limitations are entirely self-established. It's like, if I'm writing a mystery, then my limitation is that I'm not going to put supernatural elements into it, for instance. Or if I'm writing a Western, then there's no cell phones or wristwatches. But limitations in terms of where the story can or can't go, or what kind of special effects I can get away with, there's none of that, because if it's my story, I can do what I want with it.
Okay.
But I have already set those limits ahead of time that I'm going to set. Mm-hmm. I have this odd way of approaching a story, I guess, or a book especially, where I visualize a long hallway with all these open doors on either side of it, maybe light coming through from windows. And each decision I make about what the book is going to be closes a door. So I'll walk down the hallway and, okay, this is not science fiction, close that door. It's not a romance, close that door. It's not Arthurian, close that door. Main character is a woman, okay, close the man door. She's got blue eyes and one leg, closes those doors. So as I'm making my decisions about the story that I'm going to tell, I'm shutting off all the stories I'm not telling.
That's interesting.
And eventually my story becomes clear, because the doors that remain open are the ones that I'm going to be writing about.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never heard it done that way before, but I really like that idea, because it just prevents you from even accidentally going down a path, because you've really blocked that out of your mind. Yeah,
that's a visualization that I came up with a long time ago, and it works for me, but I don't know if it would work for anybody else.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a cool strategy, though. I like that. I wanted to ask you, too, you had said that you're shopping for an agent, and even though you're not being aggressive about it right at the moment, what is the process of that for you? What do you look for? What do you see that says, no, I don't want to work with this person?
It's a lot like getting married or having a girlfriend or boyfriend. It's, do your personalities mesh? Do you get along? But then with the additional complications of you're in business together. The agent wants you to make money, because the more money you make, the more money the agent makes. So it's in your agent's best interest to get you the best possible deal, and to always raise the stakes, negotiate up with the publisher. And that's in your interest, that's in the agent's interest.
Sure.
With my last agent, he tended to be only interested in trying to sell to the top, well, it used to be the top 10 publishers, now it's like the top 5, because there's only 5 big houses anymore, because of consolidation. And I'm what used to be called a mid-list writer, but these days the conventional wisdom is that the mid-list is gone, The mass market paperbacks are gone, and they've been replaced largely by ebooks. So the big five publishers are primarily interested in hardcover originals that they can sell a lot of copies of.
Yeah.
And my sales are not New York Times best-selling kind of numbers, and that's what they're looking for. So probably no longer a big five publisher.
Well, speaking as someone who is a big fan of your work, I don't see why not. I mean, if it's a marketing thing, if it's you're just not connecting with the right person making the decision, I don't know. But I've read a lot of books in my life, and your stuff is stuff that keeps me wanting to turn the page. And that's not something I can say about a lot of other authors I've read. I mean, they might have interesting stories or tell them decently well, but there's very few authors that I've just, if I have the chance and the time to read a book, I'm just going to pick one of your books versus many others I could read.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do. I try to write the best book I can every time out, whether it's my own or a tie-in or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what it is that has put my sales where they are. I don't know if it's that I don't have the right personality. I don't know if it's that I haven't been marketed correctly or marketed myself correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, I'm okay with it.
That's good.
I want to write books and tell stories and get them published so people can read them.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't make $1 million on each book, that's all right. So I need an agent who is willing to look to smaller presses, willing to work within the realities of my sales history, and not one who is just solely focused on those big five houses.
Sure.
Because big five houses, for me, can't move any more books than a smaller publisher can, and I'd rather work with a smaller publisher that I'm more comfortable with. So.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because if it really is a marketing issue, then maybe those publishers will be better at marketing you than somebody who really sees a limitation or doesn't really see the full potential. But the art is the same, and at the end of the day, that's why we do it. Is because we love creating things, and we hope that people will enjoy what we've created.
Yeah, or you could be, breaking your neck trying to get a deal with RCA or I don't know what record companies there are anymore. But if there are still record companies, you could be breaking your neck trying to get a deal with them.
Yeah.
And instead, you're doing what you love, and you're putting out great product, and you're making good music that you love and that people enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. It is that fine line between, yes, I would like to reach a bigger market. I would like to touch everyone in the world with what I create, but at the same point, I could kill myself marketing it, or I can enjoy writing it.
Yeah.
So I definitely wish you good luck with your next agent. I hope that they find that right gap, because I definitely think there is a spot for you. It's just a matter of connecting with whichever one it is. And do you think that part of this whole thing too is because we're in a time now where, same with the music industry, it's so accessible for anyone to publish a book now, that we're flooded with so much.
Yes.
That it's hard to say, hey, I've got something that you should check out above just the general shelf noise.
Yep. That's very much a reality these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone can self-publish a book and get it on the digital shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the last number that I saw, but there was just a phenomenal number of books published last year.
Yeah.
And every year recently, it's just been through the roof. So it is hard to be seen through all that.
And then on top of that, you've got the difference in Kindle pricing versus regular pricing. So a lot of authors are Kindle only, and they'll do books for 99 cents. They'll do books for free for a promotion.
Yep.
If somebody can get a book for free and read it versus paying, $5 or $6 for a book, most people are going to go for the free one.
Yep. That is also true. And it's a strategy that works for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's tough.
Make the first one perma-free, and if you have a series, then it's just like the drug dealers when I was a kid. First taste is free.
Yep. Exactly. So another strategy that I've heard, which I find interesting, is that when it comes to the younger generations of readers, they usually don't get into books that are too long. You kind of want to keep your word count under, say 70, 80,000 or below, and then they'll give you a chance. And if they've read a bunch of your books and you write a long one, then they're more likely to give it a chance. But do you think that holds true in your experience, that people just don't want to read long adventures?
I don't know how true that is. I think that there certainly is that element, but at the same time, Harry Potter. Massive books.
Sure.
And kids were snapping them up like crazy, and still are. But there might be an age where that stops being appealing. Like young adults or older teens who are busy with school and relationships and looking for their first job and that kind of thing. I don't even know if they're still millennials. Maybe they're the younger siblings of the millennials, or maybe they're the kids of the millennials at this point. But I can definitely see where a longer book would be less appealing to them. Yeah,
it's a shame. I mean, if the story is good, there's that part of me that wants to know how it ends, but I would rather enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I like long books. So I tend to write long books, but I like to immerse myself in that world and stay there for a while. Yeah. If I think the world is interesting.
Yeah, I remember the 2+ decades it spanned to read Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and it was one of those things where you never forgot about those people, and every once in a while some cliffhanger or something would pop into your head and you couldn't wait for the next book, even if it was 10 years between.
Right.
And some of those books were 800-900 pages, but the stories carried for the most part so well that you didn't care. It was like you said, it was wanting to immerse yourself in it.
And I love that.
I hope that storytelling doesn't become predicated on that. I would hate to think that everything in the future will be a short story.
Well, there is the theory that we're losing our attention span, our devices, and checking our phones every 10 minutes, and that kind of thing, that the attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter. And like you, I hope that is a temporary thing, or a minority of the population. Because I think reading is important, and books are important, and stories tell us other ways we can live, other ways we can see things and view the world around us. And stories let us try on lives that are not like our own.
Yes.
I think we need that as a culture.
Well, it allows you to imagine yourself in the footsteps of somebody that you aren't, carrying through whatever situation or adventure or, challenge. And I think the other thing is that with all of this technology, I'm afraid that we're losing our imaginations.
There is definitely an aspect of that, because it's all presented for us instead of letting us see it for ourselves.
Right. I remember as a kid playing games like Zork, where it was all word-driven adventures. There were no graphics whatsoever. And they would give you a brief description of what room you were in or what area you were in and what directions you could go and what objects were in the room. And you had to solve whatever puzzle. And it was purely minimal description, but in your head, you're creating these, vast jungles and huge cavernous systems. And I just don't see as many opportunities for that anymore, because with everything being so heavily video driven, you're not giving that chance.
Yeah, and that's an issue that I face with our own kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're 9 and 14, and their faces are looking into a screen for a big part of the day.
Right.
I have to nudge them and say, "Hey, go read a book."
Do they not have a natural interest in reading, being the child of a writer?
Not to the point that I would expect them to, not to the point that the older kids were.
Yeah.
But then the older kids weren't raised with screens from the time they were infants.
Sure.
And the younger kids have always had them. So it's definitely a concern going forward for not just my family, but all families.
Right. Yeah. And now that the technology just goes everywhere with you, I mean, it was bad enough when home computers became a thing, and you could see that trend starting. But now that the technology is in your hand, literally everywhere you go, I mean, how many kids these days can do math in their head?
Well, I never could, so I can't say.
Well, then that was unfair of me.
I understand your point, nonetheless. But, I used to go on road trips with my parents, for instance, and I would have like 4 books that I would take with me because I'm going to be gone for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And they might bring a book on a 5-day trip, and they might look at it a few times, but they're much more likely to look at the screen and even out the window.
Did you only read novels, or did you ever bring like a puzzle book?
Mostly novels, but occasionally puzzle stuff, and to kind of card games like Card Bingo that force you to look out the windows and see the surroundings that you're going through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think in general, especially now, given what we've been talking about, I think that we tend to miss so much of what's around us because we're too busy focusing on everything but the world around us.
Yes.
It's a shame.
Yes. Yeah. It's
a shame. Well, before we go, Jeff, and I've really enjoyed our talk, and I'm so glad that you came on the show. For some of these newer writers that are starting out and they're trying to find their niche and trying to figure out who they are as writers, what would you say to them to kind of maybe start building a foundation of confidence?
Read, first of all. I know a couple of writers who don't read, or who don't read fiction anyway, and are still good fiction writers, but that's incredibly rare, and I don't understand how they do it. So my first advice would be to read widely. Fiction, nonfiction, magazines, newspapers, whatever you can get your hands on. Because the more you know and the more you're exposed to the world, the more you will be able to write things that are interesting to people other than yourself. And that is important. And I think writing is a muscle like any other. And if you exercise it regularly, it will be there for you when you need it.
So true.
And if you don't exercise it, it's not going to be there. So if you're not writing regularly, you're only hurting yourself.
Yeah.
The people who don't read the books that you didn't write will not be damaged by not having read them because you never wrote them.
Ooh, That should be on my refrigerator. I like that. That should be something that I remind myself of daily. I like that. And it's okay if you're writing things just for exercise or writing things that you're not going to release. Just write, let it out. Right. Build that muscle.
Work that muscle. Doesn't matter what you're writing.
That's good stuff. Now that you were saying that, though, I did come up with one additional question. I'm very curious to get your thoughts on Save the Cat.
On what?
Save the Cat. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a book that basically tells you the formula for writing. Like on what page number this should start happening, and on what page number that should end. It's basically like a blueprint for the formula of telling a story.
I am not familiar with it. Maybe it works. If it works for anyone, to get through their first book or their first story or whatever, then that's great. I've got plenty of writing books here that I sometimes refer to, even though I have written 70-some novels of my own and some nonfiction and stories and comics and whatever else. I still refer to these books, so I don't have anything against that idea in principle. I wouldn't want every book to be written to that formula.
Right.
But at the same time, I have read entertaining books that were written to a formula.
Mm-hmm.
This is going back a ways, but Robin Cook's first novel was Coma, which then became a movie. Mm-hmm. It was a huge bestseller, and it was a riveting story. Really well told, compelling, the kind of book you don't put down. And he wrote it by basically dissecting a couple of years' worth of best-selling thrillers and figuring out just those things.
Mm-hmm.
At page X, the story turns this way, and at page Y, that revelation is made this way. He did that, and he wrote a novel, and it was a terrific novel. And it launched his career, which is still, as far as I know, going strong.
That's great. And for the one-off or for your first couple, I would say that's probably okay. But if I knew that every Jeff Mariotte book that I read, on page 40, I was going to meet the character that was going to be the hero, it would just get so stale that there would be no point in doing it.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think as a practice tool, as a learning tool, I think it's great. But I think it just is one of those things that people can depend on as a crutch too much.
Oh yeah.
And they that becomes their comfort zone, and that's what they stay in. And you've got to branch out. I think a story should be fluid wherever the story goes, however long it needs to be to tell that story properly. Should be the focus more so than these pivot points.
Oh, and you see the same thing with screenwriters who rely on the hero's journey too much, and when that old character comes out at the beginning, that he's going to be the wise guy that sends the character off on his quest. Where those twists and turns are going to come from, and if you can telegraph them the first 10 minutes of the movie, then it loses some interest. But at the same time, some really good screenplays have been written with that formula, so it's partly how you deal with the underlying structure and the formulaic aspects and what you do with it. So you can tell a good story that way, but you probably wouldn't want to do it every time.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Jeff, it's been a great time. I thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait
to see. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Can't wait to see what you do next, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you find a good agent this time.
Well, thank you.
You bet. Take care and come and see us again.
Okay. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yeah, there's so many things I love about Jeff, and besides his writing, he's just an incredibly knowledgeable and articulate guy. Really has had some pretty amazing experiences. I mean, sure, there's an element of luck of just, knowing the right people in the beginning that happened to lead you to some really cool things. But if the quality of the work wasn't there, it doesn't matter who you know, because it's only going to go so far. And certainly Disney's not going to be buying it. I mean, you have to have the talent to back up, but the contacts obviously are important too, so that you get the opportunity. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Haskin Cast podcast. Please go ahead and leave some feedback or do a rating of the show on whatever source that you're getting it from. Take care, guys, and have a great week.